time at some fancy college. Forget that, it's too much to read. He's got a book of complete world knowledge. It's all you'll ever need.
Good evening. My name is John Hodgman. Thank you for joining us this evening. As noted, I am the author of a book. It is called The Areas of My Expertise, commonly in the vulgar. There is a full title of the book, and if you wish to know it, the complete title is as follows: An Almanac of Complete World Knowledge, compiled with instructive annotation and arranged in useful order by me, John Hodgman, a professional writer in the areas of my expertise, which areas include matters historical, matters literary, matters cryptozoological, hobo matters, food, drink, and cheese, which is a kind of food, lobsters, squirrels, eels, haircuts, utopia, what will happen in the future, and most other subjects.
Most other subjects include having asthma, living in fancy hotels, terrible haircuts, and Dungeons and Dragons, monsters and magical spells. All of your travels are finally over. You're safe now, there's nothing to fear. Sit back, a glass of your favorite beverage. You're lucky to be here, 'cause tonight, holding a key, fits in a lock, opens the door, shows you a room. It's holding the heart, it's pumping the blood, it's feeding your brain with information, sweet information, sweet information.
That's Jonathan Coulton, ladies and gentlemen. Jonathan Coulton has several plates screwed into his skull that sometimes affects the speakers. Beautiful. I was not always this way. A long time ago, I was a professional literary agent and high-powered media insider whose job it was to decide the fates of young novelists every day, yay or nay, often while playing bocce, my favorite game, usually while drunk, on fine brandy provided to me by the nation's publishers. It was a perfect existence. But as it is our common destiny as we grow older to become that which we most loathe, so I have become that most loathsome thing, a writer. I am sorry about this. I was not looking forward to it, but it was bound to happen. But back when I was a literary agent, people would come to me for advice all the time about how to be a successful author of books. What sort of books should I write, they would ask. How do I get them published? What do I need in order to be a successful writer? And I would always answer in the same way. You need a few things. You need the ability to endure solitude, because writing is a lonely craft. You need to be able to convince yourself that the world has to hear what you have to say. This comes naturally to some people. Some people automatically believe that the world has to hear what they have to say. These people are assholes. And they are not typically very good writers either. You need special stationery, obviously, with your name at the top, and it should say professional writer on it. And then I would add like a picture of a typewriter or a quill and an inkwell, you know, if you want publishers to take you seriously. And obviously, you need a literary theme. Did you hear that? What is that? Say it again?
A cyborg.
A cyborg. You are? I think we're going to be hearing a lot of strange things tonight. Is this the most haunted Codys in all of San Francisco? You also need a literary theme song. all great writers used to have literary theme songs. William Faulkner, of course, had the love theme from The Sound and the Fury, which called for a chamber quartet and a chorus of idiot man-children. Obviously, not many people have heard of William Faulkner these days, but the song is still an enormous hit at weddings, if you can find the idiot man-children. Many a union has been blessed by their bellowing. Edgar Allan Poe was a poet and composed his own theme song, The Eye of the Tiger, which, as you know, was later used as the theme song for the movie Rocky III, handpicked by Sylvester Stallone, our nation's greatest Poe enthusiast, which is a true fact. Perhaps the last true fact you will hear this evening. You may look it up if you wish. Not now. Not now. Oh, hello. How are you? Good. Good, thank you. And you just heard Jonathan playing my theme song. I don't know why why writers don't have more theme songs these days, because they're not very hard to get. Obviously, you can convince a singer-songwriter to write almost anything for like some nuts and berries. You know? The hard thing is to find a troubadour who will follow you around from town to town to sing your theme song. I found Jonathan wandering in the woods of southern Connecticut, a feral mountain man who had been raised by woodland creatures, and he looked, terribly rustic like this then, and he wore this shirt that he made out of the chickadees that had raised him. He didn't even speak English at the time. He just spoke a kind of click language of his own devising. But I could see that he had talent. He was already clicking away on some very beautiful literary theme songs out there in the woods. And he already knew how to play guitar. He had already learned how to play guitar somehow. Of course he didn't call it a guitar at the time. He called it I think it was some sort of onomatopoeia, right? Yes. But I thought he had potential, so I brought him back to civilization, and I shaved him as best I could, brought him here for you now, and now he speaks English, well, almost like an English speaker. Isn't that right, Jonathan?
Yes. Thank you.
Astonishing, isn't it?
I appreciate, ladies and gentlemen, your kind attention.
Okay, that's... No.
Okay. Thank you.
Once that rudimentary mouth shape gets going, I'll never shut up. That's good. My book is a book of trivia. This is a copy of my book, and so is this. I will note the differences between these two later, but see if you can spot them, like a game. It is an almanac, a compendium of complete world knowledge, very much like the old Book of Lists or People's Almanacs or Donati's Extraordinary Origin of Everyday Things or Ripley's Believe It or Not, all those crackpot reference books from the 70s and 80s that I loved so. And indeed all of their almanacian predecessors from before them, the North American Almanac, the Old Farmer's Almanac, World of Wisdom, Old Werewolf's Almanac, It's a long publishing tradition, but the distinction with mine is a brand new kind of almanac because it is distinguished by the fact that all of the fascinating trivia and historical oddities and amazing true facts in my book are made up by me, and thus allowed to be more truthful. Truth is stranger than fiction, goes the old saw, but never as strange as lies. Proof of which maxim is the fact that I just made it up. Probably the oldest almanac in the American publishing tradition goes back to a time before there was a United Statesman. Poor Richard's Almanac came out and was America's first bestseller. The New World's first bestseller was Poor Richard's Almanac. It was not written by Poor Richard. There was no one named Poor Richard. There was someone named Benjamin Franklin, and he was extremely wealthy and not poor at all. And he wrote under that name, presumably because he had things to hide. That is why we know him as America's most shiftiest founding father. And in the okay. I see the anti-Franklinites here.
I appreciate him. Wrote a great book about mistresses.
And he also included in the almanac, in addition to the traditional dubious meteorological information, bits of folklore, scraps of poetry, a lot of pushy maxims telling you how many pennies to save. I found it to be not a very good book myself. I found the product placement to be too much. Franklin was really pushing the bifocals very hard. Like a stitch in time saves bifocals. Doesn't mean anything. And electric kites, he was advertising electric kites all the time as well. But he did include in the book one thing, aside from mistressing, that was very interesting, and this was the 6 Oaths of the Virtuous Child. Now, this is not something that he wrote, rather it is something that he took from the American schoolhouse of the time. It was something that was recited, obviously, long before there was a Pledge of Allegiance, back during a time when American education mainly meant standing in front of a wood stove and being hit. Now, I'd like to begin the evening by reciting it. There may be some elderly among you who might recall it, but for the rest, I will lead you and in the words, and I will say them, and then all you have to do is repeat what I say when I indicate thusly. All right, we'll try it again. When I indicate thusly. Okay, that's good. But you have to be louder. Pretend you're standing by a wood stove being hit. This is my first time I've ever done this with a lav mic. How does it sound? Good. Today shall not be wasted. All right, let's try to get it together. I shall rise before the sun.
I shall rise before the sun.
So that I may then watch my family as they slumber.
So that I may then watch my family as they slumber.
With intent, waiting eyes.
With intent, waiting eyes.
I shall honor my mother today.
I shall honor my mother today.
And I shall tell Father he is powerful.
And I shall tell Father he is powerful.
Today I shall be clean.
Today I shall be clean.
I shall not touch my teeth.
I shall not touch my teeth.
Knowing that the oils of my skin shall cause them to disintegrate.
Knowing that the oils of my skin shall cause them to disintegrate.
That's not true, by the way. This is old junk science. Go ahead and touch your teeth. You have no oils in your skin. I shall instead sharpen them with a good steel twice after prayers.
I shall instead sharpen them with a good steel twice after prayers.
I shall be a faithful child.
I shall be a faithful child.
And I shall ever make science my enemy.
And I shall ever make science my enemy.
Also eels.
Also eels.
At day I shall perform my chores and duties happily.
At day I shall perform my chores and duties happily.
And if I see an eel, I shall kill it.
And if I see an eel, I shall kill it.
At night I shall dream of more labor.
At night I shall dream of more labor.
And in my sleep I shall smile with sharpened teeth.
And in my sleep I shall smile with sharpened teeth.
Knowing that today has not been wasted.
Knowing that today has not been wasted.
Very good. You guys really pulled it together there at the end. You owe yourselves a round of applause. Thank you very much. Of course, if you had applauded afterward in colonial era schoolhouses, you would have been burned. I noted before there are 2 versions of my book. There are small differences between them. One of them is very hard. This is old. This is garbage now. This is dead. It's a bad habit that I read from it. Throw it away, sir. Buy 2 of these. You see, this is the new paperback edition of my book, which was just published. We had to do a paperback edition. When the hardcover came out, college students and people from high school and also people from the Pacific Northwest were coming to me saying, your book is too expensive in hardcover. I am a poor college student or person from the Pacific Northwest. I cannot afford it since I have to buy so much marijuana. And so we came out with the soft cover edition, which you can see is much more flexible and is less expensive. And so I hope the students will appreciate it because it is less expensive and it can be much more easily rolled up into a hash pipe. So there you go. Yes. It also afforded me the opportunity to offer some additional complete world knowledge that I discovered between the 2 editions. I'm sure you have received the same news that I have, that there have been some changes at the Mall of America since I last visited. I visited the Mall of America long before the hardcover edition, back when I was just a magazine writer and a food columnist. I had been assigned to go report on what was going down at the food court at the Mall of America, and I discovered some fascinating differences between the orange chicken at the Panda Express in the North Court versus the orange chicken at the Panda Express in the South Court. Some distinct differences in terroir that were really interesting that I could write about. And I also discovered some other fascinating and surprising things about the Mall of America, which I reported in the hardcover edition of my book. But one of the things that has changed, and I have used the paperback edition as an excuse to update, is the fact that the amusement park in the Mall of America is no longer called Camp Snoopy. Did you read about this? Yes, this gentleman nods. Are you Minnesotan? No? Are you some sort of Charles Schultz freak or something? Well, anyway, yeah. I'm glad you're with me on this. You can verify that it is true, right? It used to be called. From what you told us. It used to be called Camp Snoopy, and was themed to Charlie Brown and Peanuts. And so, you know, you'd have pictures and characters wandering around and so forth. And then they lost that license, so they had to they scrubbed from the park all reference to Charlie Brown and Snoopy and Peanuts. So, for example, certain rides like the kite-eating tree, based on Charlie Brown, the tree that always ate Charlie Brown's kites. The kite-eating tree ride was renamed the Tree Swing ride. The Red Baron Attacks ride was renamed the Menacing German. And sadly, all of the 8-year-old children who had been hired to wander the park in states of existential dread, talking about philosophy and politics in coded terms, were all fired. And they now live sort of as a pack together in a tent in parking lot 2035 in the Mall of America, where they regularly harass shoppers. You may have read about this. They regularly harass shoppers with blankets and quotations from the Book of Luke. But otherwise, all of the information that was contained in my original hardcover edition of my book regarding the Mall of America is accurate, up-to-date, and totally truthful, except the parts that I made up. It takes the form of a diary. Day 1. At 200 million square feet, the Mall of America is the largest mall in the United States. In addition to 520 shops, 2/3 of which are devoted to the sale of NYPD baseball caps, it has a chapel and a school and a post office and an amusement park formerly called Camp Snoopy inside of it. It is not, I should point out, the largest mall in North America. That distinction belongs to the West Edmonton Mall of Canada, which contains 7,000 baseball cap shops, a sausage factory, a complete medieval castle, 12 monorails, and the entire township of East Edmonton, preserved like Pompeii at the exact moment that it was devoured by the West Edmonton Mall. Still, the Mall of America is very large, so large that I can actually see it from my hotel window literally hundreds of feet away. Its phosphor lights obliterate the Minnesota evening, and I do not know how they get the giant bats to keep circling it. Day 2. The Mall of America is filled with elderly people who are always walking, circling the mall like sharks. They say, for exercise. When they collapse, mall security discreetly removes them and props them up in the booths at Johnny Rockets and leaves them there to their fate. One elderly woman has agreed to show me her favorite places to eat in the mall. Her name is Elaine. She takes me to the Odyssey Cafe. It is a restaurant with 4 dining rooms, each devoted to the style of a lost civilization. I am not very impressed with the Atlantis room, I have to say, which is just a blue room with pictures of fish in it, not a single picture of a merman or porthole, which to me just seems obvious. But the Machu Picchu room is stunning, with beautiful murals of mountaintops, and the air is very thin, and it is difficult to breathe there. And all the hard-boiled eggs are undercooked. And in fact, the room is also staffed by actual Incas, looking sad and doing their sad little math with knots of string when they are not serving you omelets. Elaine says, this is all that remains of the once great civilization. Day 3. The Minnesota Picnic is a stand in the North Food Court that is run by three brothers, all of them Egyptian. They serve traditional favorites of the Minnesota State Fair: fried pike on a stick, corn dogs on a stick, deep-fried cheese curd, and bamia matbuka, the famous Egyptian okra stew, which unfortunately cannot be served on a stick. The brothers implore me to try their new invention, deep-fried cheesecake on a stick, which is all old news to you people now, I appreciate, but at the time it was a stunning innovation in food-on-a-stick technology. They then admit that they are sad like the Incas are sad. After 10 years in the Mall of America, their lease is not being renewed, and the mall refuses to return their calls and explain why. They are being kicked out. I ask if maybe they are being discriminated against because they are Egyptian. This was very soon after 9/11. That's why I asked these things. We always ask those things at the time. Oh no, they say. Oh no. No, no, no. Day 4. I call the mall's PR people and ask why they're exiling the Egyptians, and also to ask about the secret tunnel I've found that leads from the amusement park to the Pottery Barn and is lined with human skulls. This is when the Mall of America stops returning my calls. It happens sometimes when journalists ask the hard questions. I have been frozen out. From here on in, I'm going in rogue. Day 5. Elaine takes me to the Serial Adventure, which is a miniature theme park run by General Mills, makers of Tricks and Lucky Charms. There is a miniature golf course as well as an interactive exhibit on how Lucky Charms are made. Here it is shown how the leprechauns are first flayed and then pulped to be turned into the marshmallows. Off to the side are waist-high piles of little green hats, which are to be returned to Ireland under special treaty. Am I the only one here who finds this creepy, I ask aloud, but Elaine ignores me. You can have your picture taken and put on a box of Wheaties, she says. That's insane, I say. I can't masturbate to a picture of myself. Where are the Mary Lou Retton boxes? We then go to the Serial Adventure Cafe, which claims to have all the General Mills cereals for sale. They have the Monster cereals, Blueberry, Count Chocula, and Frankenberry. But I am surprised to learn they have never heard of the cereal called Fruit Brute, which you will remember was a fruit cereal based on a werewolf. They have never even heard of a cereal called Yummy Mummy, which was a mummy that was fruit flavored. And I wonder whether they really have any business running a Serial Adventure Cafe at all, frankly. Those are true cereals, by the way. Are there any other children here before I read on? Good. Day 6. My last interview is with a Minnesota woman who just opened a pastry shop using her grandmother's cheesecake recipe. Her store is called A la Mode. I ask her if she's tried the deep-fried cheesecake on a stick that the Egyptians are serving over at the Minnesota Picnic, and she just smiles in an eerie way that makes me think that she knows their days are numbered, and soon she will be cheesecake queen of the mall. Working in the mall is a little nerve-wracking, she confides to me, because as the largest mall in the United States, we are a prime target for terrorism. Do you know what I say? Fuck you. Day 7. My 3-day journey is complete. I check in with one of the Egyptian brothers on my way out of the Mall of America. Did you ever discover why they're kicking us out, he asks. No, I say. The mall officials are stonewalling me. I have gone rogue, I explain. He nods as only a sad Egyptian about to lose his deep-fried palace at the Mall of America can nod. Perhaps, he says, this is for the best. He gives me something fried on a stick, and I promise to eat it someday. But for now, and for me, and for him, the Minnesota Picnic is over. Thank you very much. We now come to the portion of the program devoted to hobo matters. The hobo material in the book was actually not supposed to be in the book at all, interestingly enough. It was originally going to be a PBS documentary that Jonathan and I were putting together. We were pitching it to PBS as a kind of, like a Ken Burns style documentary. And we'd start with an old antique photo of a hobo from the Great Depression jumping onto a boxcar. And Jonathan would play some annoying folk music, and I would narrate the history of the hobos of the Great Depression, and the camera would pan very slowly over the photograph, like this, as I spoke. And then Jonathan would play some more folk music, and we'd come around and start panning this way, back over the same photograph. It was just going to be one photograph, the entire documentary, a 36-part series. It was going to be extremely cost-effective. I thought, frankly, it was a slam dunk, as they say in sports patois. But unfortunately, it was not to be. It turns out, and this surprised me, apparently, hobos do not show up on photographic film. So that kind of ruined the whole project. And so I decided to repurpose the script for the documentary in this book. But now that Jonathan is here and he has his guitar, we can at least reproduce for you what the soundtrack would have been. So you can just close your eyes and listen and pretend that you're falling asleep in front of PBS, which I'm sure you're very used to anyway, and listen to these hobo matters. They called it the war to end all wars. They called it the London Fire and the Trail of Tears, but they were all wrong. It was called the Great Depression, and the hobos saw it coming. 1929, October, Black Thursday, the 24th day of October, 1929. The day the stock market crashed, instantly wiping out $30 billion in stock value. Soon after, the Bank of the United States would collapse, trapping all inside, many of them orphans. After a decade of high-flying prosperity, the United States economy fell to earth and began tunneling to an awful volcanic core of despair, food riots, annoying folk songs, and lava. By March, 250,000 apple sellers would crowd the streets of Manhattan, desperately refusing to sell any other kind of fruit. But apples and sellers alike were easy picking for the hobos. There had been hobos in the United States since the time there had been trains and liquor, which is to say, always. But by 1930, an estimated 2 million broken souls had taken to the wandering life, hopping boxcars, picking up work where they could find it, wearing the same pants every day, and drinking, drinking, drinking. In many ways, they were a nation unto themselves. They had their own currency in the form of hobo nickels, which were ordinary buffalo nickels that the hobo would redecorate with a penknife and carve in new little figures, taking a buffalo nickel, for example, and changing it to look like a hobo dressed as a buffalo. They had their own crafts. They were very fond of lint knitting. The hobo was fascinated by lint. He would stare at it for hours. And he would go from town to town and pull pills off of sweaters that had been left outside. And he would knit those pills into new sweaters and attempt to resell them to the original owner. He had many deranged schemes that way. And of course, the hobos had their own language, a system of scrawled hieroglyphics chalked onto barn sides and picket fences, little icons that the hobo would leave for the next hobo to come along and indicate to him areas of opportunity or of danger. So, for example, a cross on the side of a house would indicate that religious talk would get you a good meal at that house. Or a stick figure of a woman surrounded with 3 triangles next to her would mean a woman lives here alone with her children, or alternately, a woman lives here who is very fond of triangles. 3 stars would mean, obviously, that the hobo should watch out because the sheriff in that town is very good with throwing stars, also known as the hobo's bane. How the hobo dreaded the shuriken, believe me. And then, of course, there was this symbol, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. H, surrounded by sun rays, for those of you in the distant back who don't know the letter H, was seen throughout the United States almost simultaneously and everywhere in 1932, chalked onto boxcars, chalked onto the backs of policemen's uniforms, carved into the mashed potatoes at diners, and plowed in gigantic scale into wheat fields like a great crop circle, presumably to be seen by the hobos above. No one knew what it meant except for the hobos, who certainly knew that it meant just this. It was time for the hobos to rise up and take over the United States government, which they did. When in 1932 great masses of unemployed veterans descended upon Washington to urge the passing of the bonus bill, the hobos came with them. They took advantage of the chaos to infiltrate the White House and pocket sandwiches. They captured the Department of the Treasury and replaced Secretary of Treasury Ogden Mills with one of their own, Hobo Joe Junkpan, to date our only hobo Secretary of the Treasury. And across the country they began a coordinated reign of terror, soiling feather beds, salting cornfields, and dancing manic, heavy-footed jigs on parlor floors while ordinary citizens looked on in horror. They wrote semi-literate editorials to the newspapers, demanding cheap beer and warm hats. They wanted bent nails and pieces of string. They demanded half barrels of swallow feather sauce, and no one knew what they were talking about. Finally, in 1933, a new president came to the nation and promised a new deal against the hobos. FDR knew there was only one way to end the hobos' march across the blighted land: polio. Alone in his fireside lab, Roosevelt created a concentrated serum of the dreaded disease that would be placed in the nation's water supply by the newly formed Tennessee Valley Authority. According to his contemporaries, Roosevelt was tortured by this decision, knowing that a significant number of non-hobo citizens would spend the rest of their lives in iron lungs, not recreationally, as a result of his actions. But it would finally put a stop to the wandering people, beginning at their feet and ending at their waists. But then came Pearl Harbor. December 7th. Some say that Roosevelt knew the Japanese would attack that infamous morning. The truth is, he did not, but the hobos did. As quickly as they came, the hobos mysteriously disappeared after Pearl Harbor. No one knows where they went or why. Some say they found patriotism in their hearts and joined America against their common enemy, Europe. Others say they went to another planet or to another dimension. And still others say they're still out there today, wandering around quietly from town to town, preparing for the day that their great moonshine and chicken bone empire may rise again. Is it possible? No. It's not possible. Most people who study this sort of thing agree that they probably went to another planet. But if you live near a railway track and listen as the train passes, it is almost as if you can still hear the hobos singing, the dark and lonely wind of history still blowing from their rotted lungs. Jonathan.
One evening as the sun went down and the jungle fires were burning, down the track came a hobo hiking, and he said, "Boys, I'm not turning. I'm headed for the land that's far away, beside the crystal fountain. I'll see you all this coming fall in the Big Rock Candy Mountain."
I'm going to interrupt you one. I'm sorry, Jonathan. Sorry. I just want to, you all know, maybe some people don't know this song. This is the Big Rock Candy Mountain. It's a famous old American folk traditional. A lot of people think of it as a kid's song today. You hear it in movie soundtracks. You hear it in television advertisements for fast food franchises. But it is none of these things originally. Originally it was a hobo song, perhaps the most famous hobo song describing the great hobo Valhalla known as the Big Rock Candy Mountain. A place where all hobos would go someday, a place where handouts grew on bushes, and cigarettes grew on trees, and alcohol would flow down in streams from the mountain and fill up giant lakes of whiskey. There would also be, according to the song, lakes of stew, which is disgusting. But that's what hobos like. They like to bathe in their own food, apparently. and there would be bushes of lint, giant bushes of lint as high as an elephant's eye. And the hobo would carve amazing topiary sculptures of hobos, and buffalo nickels and bindle sticks out of them, and sculptures of elephants as high as their own eyes. And if you listen to the lyrics of the song, that's what you'll hear. That's what the song is about. So I just wanted to interrupt briefly. I'm sorry. Now you can really enjoy the song. Okay, go ahead.
In the big rock candy mountain, there's a land that's fair and bright, and the handouts grow on bushes, and you sleep out every night. The boxcars are all empty, and the sun shines every day on the birds and the bees and the cigarette trees, the lemonade springs where the bluebird sings in the big rock candy mountain.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt again, John. I forgot about that. You heard Jonathan sing about the lemonade springs, and maybe you're confused now because, you know, you thought that hobos hated lemonade. And it's true, they loathed lemonade more than anything else. But there's another reason why that lyric is in the song. You know, after I finished writing my book, I did some research on the hobos. And I discovered some fascinating true facts about them. And some that were, frankly, pretty disturbing. And one disturbing true fact that I learned about hobo society during the Great Depression, that within this subculture, there was a smaller group of hobos who were called jockers, who liked to have young teenage boys go with them on the hobo road. These punks, as they were called, would do their begging for the hobo and do work for the hobo and do, as I read somewhere, other things for the hobo. And this song, a lot of folklorists believe, is actually a kind of kid song, ironically after all, a kind of Pied Piper tune that the hobo would sing as he passed through a town, hoping to lure with him children onto the hobo road by tempting the child with things that all children love: lemonade springs, soda water fountains, big rock candy mountains, and cigarette trees. So, after I learned all of this, and this is absolutely true, and you can look it up, I went back and I found some other lyrics, some older lyrics to the song that you don't hear very much anymore. And Jonathan's going to sing them to you, and if you listen very closely, I think you'll find they tell a somewhat darker story. Okay, Jonathan, I won't interrupt you again.
In the big rock candy mountain, you never change your socks, and little streams of alcohol come trickling down the rocks. So your socks get good and stinky, and you're always good and drunk. It's the bestest time that you've ever had. You won't miss your friends or your mom and dad in the big rock candy mountain. In the big rock candy mountain, there's a hole that's full of treats, and the rocks all taste like sugar drops, and the dirt is nice and sweet. You can eat some as you work the mines to bring me precious gems. There's a hobo shed and some paint made of lead, and you know you're done a painting when you wake up dead in the big rock candy mountain. I love the tender, crisp bacon cheddar ranch. Yes, they grow on trees, and streams of bacon ranch dressing flow right up to your knees. There's tumbleweeds of bacon, and cheddar paves the streets. You get to veg all day, all a lot of tickets paid. There's a king who wants you to have it your way at the tender, crisp bacon cheddar ranch. Tender, crisp bacon cheddar ranch. Come and get it.
I find the last lyric to be the most disturbing of them all. I'll start putting that over there so it doesn't make as much noise. Well, we now come to the portion of the program where Jonathan and I need a rest. We get very tired. We're not athletic people, and we need to take a rest and have some alcohol. Luckily, there's a portion of the book that I cannot read for reasons that will become obvious. And luckier still, there is now an audio edition of the book where I don't have to read at all. So it just came out. It's on 6 CDs, only one of which is devoted to hobo names. You can throw that one away or use it as a coaster because you don't want to listen to that. And Dolores, you had put together a little package. Is it over there? Oh, I see. Okay, very good. So while I get this technology set up for you so that you can hear the audio book, Jonathan and I are going to have a drink of delicious brandy.